The mining planet of Varek 9 was a place where hope did not survive for long. The sky was always gray, and dust storms moved slowly across the empty land like ghosts. Most workers came there because they had no other choice. Daniel was one of them. He kept his head down, finished his shifts, and tried not to ask questions. On Varek 9, asking questions usually brought trouble. One evening, armed guards suddenly called his name. That alone was strange. Humans were never called personally unless something was wrong. The guards told him to follow them to a restricted sector deep inside the facility. No explanation, no answers, just cold metal doors opening one after another. As they walked, Daniel noticed something unusual. The deeper they went, the quieter everything became. Machines stopped humming. Workers disappeared. Even the guards stopped talking. The air felt heavy, like something dangerous was waiting ahead. Finally, they reached a massive door. Warning lights flashed above it. Daniel saw deep claw marks burned into the metal surface. Whatever was inside had tried to escape before. The door opened slowly. Inside the chamber, chains hung from the ceiling like thick metal snakes. And in the center of the room, sitting against the wall, was the largest being Daniel had ever seen. She was a giant alien woman, at least 3 times his height. Heavy chains wrapped around her arms, legs, and neck, glowing with energy restraints. Her skin carried scars, some old, some fresh. Her long silver hair covered part of her face. At first, she did not move. She looked almost lifeless. Daniel felt fear rise in his chest. He had heard stories from other workers. A monster, a war destroyer, a creature that wiped out entire squads alone. One of the guards laughed. "Go closer," he said. "Let's see if she likes humans." Daniel hesitated, but the guards pushed him forward. His boots echoed loudly in the empty room. Every step felt wrong. The closer he moved, the colder the air became. Then the giant woman moved. Her eyes opened slowly. They were not filled with rage like Daniel expected. They looked tired, empty, as if she had already lost everything worth fighting for. She looked directly at him, ignoring the guards completely. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt frozen in time. Then, in a quiet and broken voice, she said, "Do whatever you want with me." The guards laughed again, thinking she was surrendering. But Daniel felt something different. Her voice did not sound afraid. It sounded defeated. He noticed her hands. Even in chains, they were trembling slightly. Not from anger, but from exhaustion. Daniel swallowed and stepped closer. Every instinct told him to stay away, yet something pulled him forward. He slowly raised his hand. The moment his fingers touched her skin, everything changed. A sudden wave of images rushed through his mind. Fire falling from the sky, cities burning, screams echoing across battlefields. He saw the giant woman standing between soldiers and a group of smaller beings, protecting them. Fighting alone, refusing to step back even as weapons tore into her body. Then another image appeared, a small child hiding behind her, crying. Daniel gasped and pulled his hand away. The visions disappeared instantly. His heart pounded as if he had run for miles. The guards noticed nothing. To them, nothing had happened. But Daniel knew something impossible had just occurred. He looked at the giant woman again. She was watching him carefully now, as if waiting for his reaction. There was no threat in her eyes, only sadness and a quiet question. Why had he seen her memories? Why him? The guards ordered him to step back, laughing as they closed the chamber again. They believed the experiment was over. Just another failed attempt to make the prisoner react. But as Daniel left the room, he felt her gaze still following him. For the first time since arriving on Varek 9, Daniel realized the stories were wrong. She was not a monster. And, somehow, she had chosen him. Outside the chamber, warning sirens suddenly echoed through the facility. Red lights flashed across the hallway. Ships had entered the planet's orbit without permission. Daniel stopped walking. Something was coming. And deep inside the prison, the chained giant slowly closed her eyes, as if she already knew who had arrived. After that night, Daniel could not stop thinking about the giant woman. The images he saw when he touched her stayed in his mind like memories that were not his own. Fire, fear, and the small child hiding behind her. None of it felt fake. It felt real, too real to ignore. Life on Varek 9 continued as usual, but Daniel noticed something had changed inside him. The loud machines, the shouting workers, the endless dust, everything felt distant now. His thoughts kept returning to the prison chamber deep underground. 3 days later, the guards called his name again. This time, Daniel understood. He was not being punished. He was being used. The guards brought him back to the same heavy door. One of them joked that the monster only stayed calm when the human was around. Another said they should keep Daniel alive just for that reason. Daniel said nothing. He simply walked inside when the door opened. The giant woman was in the same position, chained to the wall. But this time, her eyes opened before he even stepped close. She had been waiting. The guard stayed near the entrance, watching carefully. They expected violence. Instead, silence filled the room again. Daniel stopped a few steps away. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she spoke softly. "You came back." Her voice was weak but steady. Daniel realized she was not speaking the common language perfectly. She was learning it. "I didn't have a choice," Daniel replied quietly. She studied his face, as if trying to understand something deeper than words. "You felt it," she said. "The memories." Daniel hesitated, then nodded. She lowered her head slightly. "Your kind different. Humans feel without shields." Daniel did not fully understand what she meant, but he knew one thing. She was not lying. Slowly, he stepped closer again. The guards shifted nervously, but allowed it. They wanted results. When Daniel touched her arm this time, the memories did not crash into him like before. Instead, they came slowly, controlled. He felt emotions instead of images. Loneliness, pain, and something else, fear. Not fear for herself. Fear of something coming. Daniel pulled his hand back. "You're afraid," he said before thinking. The giant woman looked surprised. Then she gave a small nod. "Hunters," she whispered. "They search for me." Daniel frowned. "Why?" She did not answer immediately. Her eyes moved toward the chains around her wrists. "Because I did not obey." Outside the chamber, the guards were talking quietly among themselves. Daniel realized they could not hear everything being said. The room's energy restraints distorted sound. "You could escape," Daniel said carefully. "You're strong enough." She shook her head slowly. "If I break chains, many die." Her voice carried no pride, only certainty. "I will not cause more death." That answer stayed with Daniel. Everything he had heard about her described a destroyer, but the being in front of him sounded like someone tired of war. As days passed, Daniel was brought back again and again. Each visit made the connection stronger. She spoke more, learned faster. He learned her name, Kareth, and each time he touched her, he felt the same warning growing stronger. Something was coming closer. One evening, as Daniel prepared to leave, Kareth suddenly tightened her chains. Her eyes widened slightly, focusing on something far away. "They are near," she said quietly. Before Daniel could ask who, alarms exploded through the facility. Red lights filled the chamber. The ground trembled as distant explosions echoed above. The guards shouted into their radios. Unauthorized ships had entered orbit. Defense systems were failing. Daniel looked back at Kareth. For the first time, fear appeared in her eyes, not for herself, but for everyone inside the station. "They did not come to capture me," she said softly. "They came to finish the war." The chamber doors began to close automatically as emergency protocols activated. Daniel stepped backward, heart racing. As the door sealed shut, Kareth's voice reached him one last time. "Human, do not come back." But Daniel already knew he would, because now he understood something the others did not. The real danger was not the chain giant. It was the ones coming for her. The alarms did not stop for hours. Explosions shook the upper levels of the mining facility, and emergency lights painted every hallway in red. Workers ran in panic, guards shouted orders, and transport ships tried to leave orbit before it was too late. Rumors spread quickly. Unknown attackers. Advanced ships. No warning. Daniel worked silently, but his mind was somewhere else. Kareth's words repeated again and again in his head. They came to finish the war. That night, sleep never came. Every distant sound made him think of the prison chamber below. He knew the guard would lock the lower levels first if the situation became worse. Prisoners were always the last priority. The next morning, the facility commander made an announcement. The attackers were not pirates. They were hunters, a private military group known for tracking dangerous alien targets across systems. They had come for one reason only: the giant prisoner. Daniel felt his stomach tighten. So it was true. They were not here for the station. They were here for her. Later that day, chaos in the facility created an opportunity. Security teams were moved to defensive positions, leaving several lower corridors lightly guarded. Daniel made a decision he did not fully understand himself. Instead of returning to his quarters, he moved toward the restricted sector. The heavy doors were still active, but fewer guards stood watch. Everyone was focused on the attack above. When the chamber finally opened, Kareth was already awake. She looked at him with surprise. "You should not be here," she said quietly. Daniel stepped inside anyway. "They're coming for you." She nodded slowly. "I know." For a moment, neither spoke. The sound of distant impacts echoed through the metal walls. Daniel looked at the chains again. Up close, he noticed something he had missed before. The restraints were not only holding her in place, they were draining energy from her body. Small pulses of light moved through the metal into the floor. "They're weakening you," Daniel said. "Yes," she replied calmly. "So I cannot fight." Daniel frowned. "Then why don't you escape before they arrive?" Karetha's eyes lowered. "Because last time many died." She hesitated, then slowly reached toward him. Daniel understood and placed his hand against her skin again. This time, the memory came clearly. A battlefield under a burning sky. Kareth standing alone against ships descending from above. She destroyed them to protect civilians behind her, but the destruction spread too far. Buildings collapsed. Innocent lives were lost. The victory turned into guilt. The vision ended with her surrendering willingly, allowing herself to be captured. Daniel stepped back, breathing heavily. The truth hit him hard. She was not imprisoned because she lost. She surrendered because she refused to hurt anyone again. "You're not a weapon," Daniel said quietly. Kareth looked at him, surprised by the certainty in his voice. Before she could answer, the station shook violently. A louder explosion echoed above them. Dust fell from the ceiling. Emergency sirens changed tone. Defense lines had failed. "They're inside," Kareth said. Daniel's heart raced. If the hunters reached her while she was chained, she would not survive. And neither would anyone nearby if fighting started. For the first time, fear mixed with anger inside him. The people calling her a monster never knew the truth. He looked at the control panel near the wall. Security locks held the chains in place. One command could release them. "You said you won't escape because people might die," Daniel said slowly. "But if they kill you here, more people will die anyway." Kareth remained silent. Another explosion shook the chamber. Lights flickered. Daniel made his choice. He moved to the panel and placed his hand over the release control. His fingers trembled. Once he started, there would be no going back. Kareth watched him carefully. "Human," she said softly. "If you do this, everything changes." Daniel looked back at her. For the first time, he saw not a prisoner, not a warrior, but someone who had carried too much pain alone. "Maybe it needs to," he replied. He pressed the command. One of the chains unlocked with a loud metallic crack, falling to the floor. Energy surged through the room. Kareth gasped slightly as strength returned to her body. The ground vibrated beneath them as alarms screamed louder. Above the station, hunter ships continued their descent. And for the first time since her capture, the giant guardian was no longer fully chained. The moment the first chain fell, the air inside the chamber changed. A low vibration spread through the floor as energy rushed back into Karetha's body. The glowing restraints around her arm dimmed, and she slowly lifted her hand for the first time without resistance. The movement looked small, but Daniel could feel the power behind it. She was still weak, but no longer helpless. Warning sirens screamed louder. Overhead lights flickered as another explosion shook the station. Dust rained from the ceiling. "They are close," Kareth said quietly. Daniel looked toward the sealed doors. Heavy footsteps and distant gunfire echoed through the corridors. The hunters were already inside the facility. "Can you walk?" Daniel asked. Kareth nodded, but slowly, not at full strength. The chains drained too much. Daniel glanced at the remaining restraints. Removing all of them would restore her power, but could also turn the entire station into a battlefield. He remembered her memories, the guilt she carried. She was afraid of her own strength. Before he could speak again, the chamber doors exploded inward. Smoke filled the entrance as armored figures rushed inside. The hunters moved with precision, their weapons glowing with energy designed for large targets. They did not hesitate when they saw her. "Target confirmed," one of them shouted. Energy blasts fired instantly. Daniel barely had time to react before Kareth moved. Even weakened, she shifted her body in front of him, taking the impact against the remaining chains. The restraints sparked violently, absorbing part of the attack. She was protecting him. The hunters continued firing, forcing Daniel to take cover behind broken metal. The room filled with heat and noise. Sparks flew as weapons struck the walls. "Leave," Kareth said firmly without looking back. "This is not your war." Daniel shook his head, even though she could not see him. "It became my war when they locked you here." Another blast hit her shoulder. The chains strained under the pressure. Daniel realized the hunters were not trying to capture her. They were trying to kill her before she could recover. If she stayed chained, she would die. Daniel ran toward the control panel again. Explosions shook the chamber as he reached it. His hands moved quickly across the controls. "Daniel," Kareth warned, her voice tense. "If all chains break, I may lose control." He looked back at her. Despite the attacks, she was still shielding him in the doorway where injured workers had begun to appear. Even now, she was choosing protection over survival. "You won't," he said, "because you don't want to." He pressed the release. The remaining chains unlocked one by one, crashing onto the floor with thunderous weight. A wave of energy surged outward, pushing dust and smoke across the room. The hunters stepped back instinctively. Kareth slowly stood to her full height. For a moment, everything went silent. She looked different now. Not angry, not wild, but calm. Controlled. Her eyes focused only on the attackers. When the hunters fired again, she moved faster than Daniel expected. She deflected the blasts, disabling weapons instead of destroying the soldiers. Every movement was precise. She avoided killing whenever possible, pushing enemies away rather than crushing them. Daniel realized something important in that moment. She was holding back. The battle spread into the corridors as more explosions rocked the station. Fires burned in several sections. Workers were trapped behind fallen debris. Without hesitation, Kareth turned away from the escaping hunters and began clearing path for civilians instead. "You should run," Daniel told her. "You're free now." Kareth shook her head. "Not until they are safe." Together, they moved through collapsing hallways. She lifted heavy metal beams while Daniel guided frightened workers toward escape routes. People who once feared her now stared in shock as she saved them. But every movement drained her energy. The damage from the chains had not fully healed. Daniel could see her slowing down. At the central hangar, the final group of workers escaped onto transport ships. Outside, hunter vessels prepared for one last strike. Kareth stopped walking. "I will hold them here," she said quietly. Daniel understood what she meant. A final stand. Enough time for everyone else to escape. "No," he said immediately. "There has to be another way." She looked at him, her expression soft but certain. "This ends with me." Outside, the hangar doors began to open, revealing the burning sky of Varec 9. Enemy ships descended, weapons charging. Kareth stepped forward, ready to face them alone. But Daniel refused to move. Because this time, humanity was not going to let a protector fight alone. The hangar trembled as enemy ships descended through the burning sky of Varec 9. Their engines lit the clouds in orange and red, turning the entire horizon into fire. Workers rushed into the last transport ships, fear written across their faces. Sirens screamed their final warnings. Kareth stood at the open edge of the hangar, her massive form unmoving. Wind from the incoming ships pushed her hair back as she watched them approach. She knew what had to happen. If she stayed, The hunters would focus only on her. The others would escape. Daniel stood behind her, breathing hard. He understood her plan, and he hated it. "You don't have to do this," he said. Kareth did not turn around. "This war followed me," she replied softly. "It should end with me." Outside, energy cannons began charging. Bright light gathered beneath the hunter ships. One strike would destroy the hangar completely. Daniel looked around desperately. Broken equipment, damaged power units, abandoned cargo, pieces of a dying station. Then his eyes stopped on a portable energy stabilizer used for mining cores. An idea formed in his mind. It was risky, maybe impossible, but humans were good at trying impossible things. "You said humans feel without shields," Daniel said quickly as he ran toward the device. "Maybe that's the answer." Kareth finally turned, confused. "Human, there is no time." "There is," Daniel replied. "Trust me." The ships outside fired warning shots, shaking the ground. Daniel dragged the stabilizer closer, connecting damaged cables to its core. Sparks flew as systems struggled to activate. The machine was never meant for something like this. Kareth watched him, unsure. She could feel her strength fading. The chains had taken too much from her. If she fought now at full power, her body would fail soon after. Daniel stepped closer and placed one hand against her arm again. The familiar connection returned instantly. This time, instead of memories, he focused on one feeling, calm. "You don't have to carry this alone anymore," he said quietly. The stabilizer activated with a loud hum. Energy flowed through the cables, reacting with Kareth's natural energy instead of fighting it. The violent instability inside her body slowly began to settle. Her eyes widened in surprise. The pain she had carried since her capture started fading. "Humans," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Outside, the hunter ships prepared to fire again. But this time, Kareth stepped forward, not as someone ready to die, but as someone standing to protect. When the first blast entered the hangar, she raised her hand. The energy curved away, deflected safely into the sky. The hunters hesitated. Their target was no longer weak. More ships arrived. Not hunters, but rescue vessels responding to the emergency signal. Seeing the situation change, the hunters retreated, unwilling to risk heavy losses. Silence slowly replaced the chaos. The fires still burned across the planet, but the battle was over. Kareth lowered her hand and looked down at Daniel. For the first time, there was peace in her expression. Not relief from victory, but relief from loneliness. "You changed the ending," she said. Daniel shook his head slightly. "No, you did. You just needed someone to remind you." Rescue teams entered the hangar carefully, unsure of what they were seeing. The giant warrior they feared was standing calmly beside a human worker, not as a prisoner, not as a weapon, as an ally. Before leaving, Kareth knelt down, lowering herself to Daniel's height. Among her people, it was a gesture of deep respect. "The galaxy fear my strength," she said softly. "But your kind showed me something stronger." Daniel smiled faintly. "What's that?" She looked toward the escaping ships, toward the people she helped save. "Choice," she answered. "The choice to protect, even when afraid." As her rescue vessel prepared to depart, Kareth gave Daniel one last look. Not goodbye, but promise. Across the stars, stories would spread about the day a chained giant was freed not by power, but by humanity. Because in the end, the galaxy did not fear humans for their weapons. It feared them for their compassion.